Hi and welcome to another episode of Fashion Histories with me, Anita from Sew What Manchester. I'm going to talk to you today about something that half of the population take for granted and the other half absolutely celebrate and jump around with joy when their clothes have them, and that is pockets. Now, it's a given that menswear, pretty much any item of menswear, will have pockets sewn into them. So that shirts, jackets, trousers, even swimming trunks have pockets. But for women, it's like, there's a million memes of a woman sort of showing off a new dress and being like, and it has pockets. So I'm going to talk to you about how this weird divide came about, so the evolution of the pocket. I'm going to split it into like two parts, I think, hopefully. And so yeah, the evolution of the pocket and the history of where it came from, how it evolved, up to modern day, like how it ended up as it is. And then I'm going to talk to you about sort of what the symbolism of the pocket, which sounds really sort of highbrow. But all I mean is, like, why are pockets important? What is so interesting about the humble pocket? And how have historians learned about people from the past through what they had on themselves and like in their pockets, because they can actually tell some very interesting stories. Again, if you hear weird noises, Luna has decided to start licking her paws and grooming herself under the table. So there's some unseemly noises coming from under there, so apologies for that. So let's dive in. Okay, so the word pocket originally came from a very old French word, which is puck, which I've seen it spelled different ways, but I think it's like Pouque. And that basically meant pouch, like a small bag, usually gathered at the top, which you would carry your valuables in, money, personal items that were obviously very small, but that you wanted on you at all times. And this then evolved into the word push, which is P-O-C-H-E, and also evolved into what we now recognise as a pocket-shaped bag. So kind of flat and much bigger than like a tiny little bag. So we're going all the way back to about the 16th century. So we're looking in the 1500s. Men and women used to carry little bags, little pouches, and they were tied to their belts, or women sometimes have girdles. But anyway, just another word for belt. So they were tied to that, and these evolved over time. It's difficult to tell, like different sources kind of say different things, so it's hard to tell whether these pouches then moved to being kept on the inside of clothing, or whether these pouches evolved into what we think of as pockets and then they moved into the inside of clothing. Because history isn't like black and white. It doesn't stop and start, like one day people are carrying little bags and the next they have pockets. It all kind of, things exist at the same time, and they just kind of decrease and increase in popularity in the fashion world anyway. Especially when you're looking back like hundreds of years, like you can only work off the examples that survived. Like, we don't know if it was a different scenario to that, but we have to go off what exists and made it through till today. But there are plenty of examples, which is fascinating. Anyway, so either way, these bags evolved into like two much bigger pouches. Some of them are as big as, like, you can get your whole forearm in. They are massive. Some of them, not all of them. And they evolved into having like two of these. So it's like a bag with like a slit down the front so that you can get your hand in, but stuff doesn't fall out easily. That were attached by a string all the way around, and you would tie that around your waist. So rather than tying a separate thing to your belt, the whole thing was attached and you tied that. But obviously, if you're carrying around your valuables, your personal belongings, money, that kind of thing on your person, and people know that because everyone's doing it, you get the rise of people that want to steal that. And so you get pickpockets and you get cut purses who will, some of them slit the bottom of the pouch and catch whatever falls out, which is quite subtle really, because the person maybe wouldn't even know that that happened. Or, you know, people would slit the string that they were all attached to and run off with the whole thing. And I'll mention that again in the next part, because that's kind of how we know what was kept in these pockets. Anyway, a little teaser for you there. So obviously, you know, you're like, well, if I wear this on the outside, it's really easy to grab them or steal them or get them, or, you know, pick out whatever's in my pockets. So people started wearing them on the inside of their clothing. And this is where this weird divide happens. Did you hear Luna pulling like a big sigh there? Anyway, whatever. So when these moved onto the inside of clothing, for some reason, in menswear, these pockets started being sewn into the seams of their clothing. So they had pockets that were part of their trousers. But women didn't get that. There are examples where that was done, so then it was possible, it did happen, but it didn't seem to be like the popular way to do it. Instead, you would have, like in previous episodes, I said like the fashion was to have all your petticoats and layers of skirts, and then a big sort of over dress or skirt. And they would have like a gap in the seam at the side, so you could put your hand in through all those layers and get to your pocket, which was on the inside of them. And so even though it was possible to put pockets in there, women didn't choose to have that, or didn't want to have that, or maybe it just was too expensive, who knows. So it's really fascinating that this is where we see that split, and that's like kind of the 17th century. So we're talking as far back as the 1600s or whatever. Anyway, so I'm just quickly checking my notes because I don't want to miss anything. But then you might be wondering, okay, so if women and men always have pockets, why do we not have pockets today? And it's basically because whereas men's fashion didn't really change, like trousers then, it's the same kind of vibe as trousers today, women's fashions changed an awful lot faster and more dramatically. So pockets started to disappear from women's clothing, sort of, I think it was more like, in my head it's the 1700s, 1800s, when big skirts went out and much slimmer silhouettes came in with like a high waist on like an empire waistline, and yeah, and not all these massive layers and not this big bulky shape. And pockets had to go, because whereas under a big skirt you couldn't see if, you know, you were carrying loads of stuff and bulky pockets, in a much slimmer dress, it spoiled the line of your outfit, darling. It spoiled your silhouette, because you didn't want to see these bulky things sticking out. So pockets had to disappear. They had to go. And instead, women had to go back to carrying these tiny little bags that barely carried anything, which were called, I'm assuming it's French, but it looks like reticules, or reticules, whatever, I don't know. It sounds good though, doesn't it? Um, and essentially, pockets came and went in women's fashion as fast as trends came and went. Like, that's what dictated it. And these little reticules were the forerunner of the handbag, because even in modern times, um, even with pockets in clothing, women have like over time kind of been trained out of carrying stuff in their pockets and instead carrying them in a bag, and that's like normal. And yet for men, they carry everything in their pockets. But this also has to do with there was a study, fairly like a modern study, that found that women's pockets, I think on average, are like 3 inches shorter than men's pockets. Like, what? So some of them won't even fit like your mobile phone, let alone a wallet or a purse and your keys and anything else you want. So I find that absolutely infuriating. Anyway, so I'll leave you with a little quote which I thought was really interesting, because I do love Christian Dior, like his early designs and like the new look, even though I don't agree with the restrictions that it placed on women. The designs themselves are beautiful. But he was quoted in 1954 as saying, "Men have pockets to keep things in, women for decoration." And doesn't that just sum up how people still think of pockets in women's clothing? So in the next bit, I'm going to talk to you about like sort of some more details about pockets, like certain pockets and why we have them, where they came from, as well as the stories that pockets can tell.